February 1861, in Montgomery, Alabama, delegates from 6 seceded states met to establish the Confederate States of America. 2 months later, the first shots of the Civil War rang out. February 2018, civil rights pilgrimage participants toured the Montgomery Capitol grounds, which holds Confederate memorials celebrating the lost cause. As these symbols persist today, so do the ideologies that erected them.
When we walk through the Capitol in Montgomery, those are atrocious and offensive stories that they're telling. They're not really telling the truth behind what those monuments stood for. I think if there was more truth-telling behind the Confederate statues, I think there's a little bit more understanding. But because the narrative and the stories that are being shared around it glorify it rather than talking about it for what it really was, and that's where the disrespect and the dishonoring actually happens.
The monuments that are put up a long time ago still hold a lot of power and messaging today. And so first of all, what do they say to an individual who walks past them? If that individual is of African descent, it is saying that this is a symbol of white supremacy. This is a symbol that demonstrates a desire for, and perhaps even a longing for, a time when African American people were enslaved. And the symbolism of that does not die over time. They are put up as a symbol of white supremacy. They represent a Confederacy that fought to maintain a system of slavery.
And that's what a lot of people don't realize. A lot of these monuments, they didn't happen right after Reconstruction. They happened during the Jim Crow era.
It is important to note that most of these Confederate symbols, the very vast majority of them, did not emerge immediately following the Civil War. The Civil War ends in 1865. Most of them don't emerge until the very late 19th century and even into the early decades of the 20th century. Now that becomes extremely relevant as related to why they emerge. They were not put up immediately to somehow memorialize those who were involved in the Civil War. They were put up specifically as symbols of white supremacy in a Jim Crow era. Let's be very clear. People often want to argue that the Civil War was not about slavery, it was about states' rights. That's not true. If it was about states' rights, it was about the states' right to maintain the system of slavery. And so the symbol itself is about maintaining a particular social and economic structure that was wholly reliant on slavery.
Yeah.
And everything changed after 1877 when the feds left.
So,
So
is
then
the
they start
psychology
reasserting
that the Confederacy doesn't think it lost, like the war
They
continues?
say the South will rise again.
The South will rise
exactly.
again.
So,
Well, go back to sleep. I'm telling you, if you guys rise, go back to sleep, man. Go back.
The United Daughters of the Confederacy, they emerged first in 1894 out of Tennessee, and they still exist today. And they are very much dedicated to presenting a version of history that is committed to showing the Confederacy as part of Southern heritage. They very much quell the destruction, the pain, the violence that was heaped upon the backs of African Americans as a result of both slavery and in the post-slavery moments during Reconstruction and after, in the rise of Jim Crow. And so if we listen to their version of history, is one that's almost Disney-fied, where African Americans were part of a slave-owning family, where they were happy and wanted to participate in particular ways in society that demonstrated they were not upset with Jim Crow.
Project Pilgrimage also visited Lee's Circle in New Orleans, Louisiana, site of a 60-foot marble column that until May 2017 held a 16-foot statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. Project Pilgrimage participants walked and discussed the monument removal after hearing Take 'em Down NOLA organizer Michael Quess Moore.
November 30th, 2014 was the beginning of a quick movement in this moment in time that charged everything in the city, charged a lot around the nation and around the world to help stimulate this whole movement for the removal of white supremacist minders.
When you look at history it portrays a very white-centric perspective, and it does not tell the perspective of the person of color. And so when you grow up seeing and learning and only hearing that perspective, you think that, well, that has to be what's actually happening, but you don't know that, like, this person, I looked Robert E. Lee up, and he was not a fan of having racial equality or people of color or African Americans having the right to vote or be in political positions, but yet he has this awesome statue that stands in the middle of the city with this huge real estate and this tall pillar. And so you have to ask yourself, what's the subliminal signal of what this man represented and what are they trying to say?
I'm a historian. I believe in understanding and educating and knowing everything about history. Just because we learn about something doesn't mean that we herald all aspects of history. And so by having these monuments, what we're saying is these are the ones that we want to not just acknowledge, but celebrate. And they should not be celebrated. We don't celebrate everything in history. We know everything in history, but we don't honor and celebrate all of it.
If these things can go up, they can damn sure come down.